Good morning, everybody. It's another Monday, although I do appreciate some of you might not be watching this on Monday, so it could be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. Whichever day of the week it is, I hope you have had a wonderful weekend. It's a bit rainy and miserable today, but I know that hearing the sound of some of you singing in the hall in Assembly of Mr. Booth this morning has certainly roused my spirits, ready to get started on another wonderful week here at St Mary's. Now, my assembly today is about two important days, one that has been and one that might actually be coming or may have already happened depending on when you are watching this. So World Refugee Day is one of the days we're going to be talking about, and the other one is Windrush Day, something I've spoken to you about before, and we're going to have a little refresher on what happened with the Windrush in today's assembly. So I wonder if at the beginning you can think about actually refugees. What is a refugee? And why is World Refugee Day actually something that's really important, not just for us within the UK to think about, but actually on a global scale? So do you know what a refugee actually is, and why is this day important to mark? Talk about that as a class to begin with. So there are some photos here that may have helped you in your discussions, but these are not just the only photographs of refugees. Refugees can look in all different ways, shapes, sizes, guises. They're not just one type of person. There's so much more to what it is about and what it is to be a refugee. So World Refugee Day is important because it celebrates the strength and the courage of people who have been forced to flee their home country to escape conflict or persecution. That's what being a refugee is. It's where you have to leave your home country and your home to escape something that's really dangerous. So maybe you are at harm, like Anne Frank's family would have been at harm of being persecuted, or maybe there is war happening. Maybe your country is being ravaged by external forces, political situations, things that actually are beyond your control, but it's dangerous for you and your family to live in. And so you move to somewhere else. So during World Refugee Day, we think about building empathy and understanding for refugees and what they have to face. This is their plight, and to recognise their resilience in rebuilding their lives. So World Refugee Day shines a light on the rights, the needs and the dreams of refugees, helping to mobilise will and resources so that refugees can not only survive, but also thrive. What we have to keep in our mind is that refugees are just people like you and me. They are just people living their life with their families, wanting to do well. And actually being a refugee can sometimes mean they don't get the access to things that we get access to so easily. Bless me. So we have to think about how we can use our resources and share our resources for people in need like this. So whilst it's important that we protect and improve the lives of refugees every single day of the year, World Refugee Day is an international day, and it helps us to focus our global attention on the plight of these fleeing conflict or persecution. And there's lots of activities that happen on World Refugee Day, which provide opportunity for supporting refugees all across the globe. So World Refugee Day was actually yesterday on June the 20th, and it supports refugees across the world to be protected and included in things like healthcare, in education and in sport. Because often when you're having to leave your home country or move around quite often, you can miss out on those important things. And we know they're important for all different reasons. And sometimes it's even harder for refugees to get access because actually the language they speak is different. Maybe the systems and processes are different, and they don't have access to these things because of all those other barriers as well. So the theme of this year's World Refugee Day is Together We Heal, Learn and Shine. And I'm going to explore those three things with you now. So the first element of this year's World Refugee Day is healing. So we want to, and the UN Refugee Agency is working to help expand refugees' access to primary and secondary healthcare, to nutrition, so that means to good healthy food, and to mental health services. So that's making sure that actually they are emotionally happy and not just happy in their body, but they're also happy in their mind, because it can be very traumatic experiencing life as a refugee. And it can take a very long time to move on from that, even when you do find a place of safety. So we know access to health and medical care support saves lives. And the UN Refugee Agency is working together with all different partners and communities to make sure that people who are forced to flee their homes receive the care that they need. And the second element of this year's theme is about learning. Now, we know, each and every one of us knows that education helps people forced to flee their homes to build better futures. That is obvious because education helps all of us to build better futures. So why should it be any different for someone who's a refugee? So the UN Refugee Agency is working together with, again, partners from all different places to help and provide refugee children with access to quality education so they can pursue better lives. We know in the past year the effects that people have had and children have had for all different reasons because of the pandemic. Imagine that happens all the time. And as a refugee, that's what your life could be like. Children who really love going to school can actually be in a situation where they don't go to school for years, not just months like you've had to, but for years because of the fact they're constantly moving, or they're living in a camp where there isn't a school, or they're going from country to place to place. And for all different reasons, they feel like they can't go to school or access education. So the UN is really working to provide quality education so that all these children can get better lives, the life in all its fullness that we talk about as a school. The third avenue is about shining. So we know that sport can enrich the lives of people, any person, but also people who are forced to flee their homes. It can boost positive mental health, and it can help refugees to gain confidence, to forge new friendships and to feel welcome. We know if you think about when you do PE or you go to a sports club, you don't just get better at the sport, your body feels better, you feel happier, you gain teamwork skills, you make new friends, you bond with other people through the sport. And that's really important. So in their work to protect refugees, the UN Refugee Agency is using sport to create safe and protective environments where everyone can discover their potential. Now, in the UK, we don't just have Refugee Day. That is actually the beginning of what we have known as UK Refugee Week. So throughout this week, all across the country, there will be events taking place to help support refugee communities living within the UK, but also on a wider global scale. Some of the themes and the vision and values of Refugee Week are here in the following slide. So the first thing they think about as a vision and a value is that there is a bigger us. Now, I've talked about this quite a lot, and I know you've talked about this in PSHE lessons and things, but the reality is we are not the same. We are all human, but we're not the same. And so our experiences are different. And the reality is that we do not have equal access to resources and to power. Some people are able to pay for their healthcare and go to a private hospital. Most people go to the NHS where they can receive free healthcare. All of those things are not equal. But the reality is we are also interconnected and interdependent. Although we are individuals, we are part of a bigger us. And the safety of each person on this planet should matter to all of us. And so we should strive to come together around shared values of fairness, mutual support, kindness, and respect. Now, lots of those things link into our core Christian values here at St Mary's. And that respect for universal rights is something that the Refugee Week really focuses on. So another strand of their vision and values are celebrating contributions. So Refugee Week celebrates the contributions of refugees in order to challenge negative stereotypes and to create a space where refugees can be seen and heard beyond their experience of displacement. So where they have moved all the time. Some people have a real negative attitude towards refugees. They think refugees are dirty. They think refugees are all poor. They think refugees are ruining their country or taking away their houses and their jobs. But the reality is those people are just trying to seek a better life where they and their families can flourish and thrive, because wherever their home country is too dangerous for them. And so we should really be making sure that we look at the value of every single person on this planet, including our refugee community, because we know that everyone has a contribution to make. And we have to work to reject the idea that people who are coming to other places to seek safety should have to prove their worth more than others in society. We are all, or we should get to a place where everybody is equal. The third vision and value that they have is that arts and culture can help to make a change. The same as the UN Refugee Agency is working on developing sport as an avenue for refugees to thrive, it's the same within arts and other cultural activities. They can help us to all understand migration and displacement differently by creating connections across difference, by taking the voices and the stories and the experiences of refugees into new spaces to help us to imagine how we can live better together. Because we don't understand what it is like to live in these situations unless we actually put ourselves in their shoes. We cannot assume what it is like. We need to learn about what it is like. And we should do that by listening to the stories and the voices of others. So here I have got just a few examples of books. Some of them are in school, some of them are not, but you might find them at the library, of experiences that are real, that you can actually look at. These are stories that teach us and teach you as children about the life of a refugee. Because as we've learned, no one experience is the same. And even as a refugee, everyone's experience would be different. So here are just a few examples. Year 4, I know, are looking at refugees as part of their topic now on survival. And there is a book here that the children in Year 5 and Year 6 have enjoyed in the past. It's a book that often makes me cry, but it's a brilliant book here in the middle called The Boy at the Back of the Class, about a little boy who is a refugee from Syria. But there's all different books here that you can look at. And this one at the bottom maybe tells the story of a refugee that actually means quite a lot to us here at St Mary's, because actually Jesus was a refugee. And so this story here called Refuge is actually the story of Mary and Joseph and Jesus actually fleeing Herod. And that is another story that we could be talking about as a school. So we need to open our hearts and our minds to learn more about others through the power of story. And here are just some examples for you this morning. So moving on to the second important day that I said I was going to talk to you about this morning. The second important day is Windrush Day. Now, I want you to think back to a very long time ago now, it feels, back in October when we actually did Black History Month as a school. And I did do an assembly that did mention a little bit about the Windrush in it. So here is a picture, and I wonder, what can you remember about the SS Empire Windrush? Talk about it together at the moment. So the Windrush, June 22nd is actually Windrush Day. So if you are watching this on Tuesday, the 22nd of June, happy Windrush Day to you. And it is actually, this is the 4th National Windrush Day. And it is 73 years since the SS Empire Windrush arrived at Tilbury Docks in Essex in 1948. Carrying the first Caribbean migrants to the UK to help rebuild Britain after the Second World War. So back in October, I did tell you the story of the journey of the Windrush, how it went from all different places. It went around the Caribbean, it came back to Tilbury Docks here in Essex, and all of these people from the Caribbean, they were migrants, came back to what they called the mother country, because back then the Caribbean countries, or some of them still are, part of the Commonwealth now that we have, and they were invited to come over here to work to help rebuild the nation after the Second World War. But we did also talk about how it wasn't that easy for the migrants, and we're going to go into that in a moment. So the Windrush Generation, you might hear that phrase over this week on the news and on Newsround. Now, the Windrush Generation is a term that is used to describe the people who arrived on the Empire Windrush and other boats that came after it. They are a part of a wave of migrants who would help to rebuild and reshape the United Kingdom after World War II. Now, I have shown you these before. Here are my grandparents. There is my granddad Joseph and my grandma Mary. My grandfather actually passed away a few years ago, but my grandma is still going safe and strong in Sydenham in London, where she lives. And both of those came over. They were not on the Windrush. They actually came on a boat 2 years after the Windrush actually arrived in the UK. But they, like hundreds of thousands of others who arrived alongside with them came before the rules on immigration were tightened in 1971, and they helped to fill a labour shortage, rebuilding the country after war damage. So they helped staff in the new NHS service, which I'll be talking about in next week's assembly, and they helped to work really hard, facilitating economic growth. They worked as bus drivers, factory hands, entrepreneurs, everything. They helped out. My grandfather actually worked for British Rail. He worked on the trains, and he did that for many, many, many years before he retired. And my grandma actually worked in medical services. She was a glass blower. So she used to make things, amazing things in medical services. So all of these skills that people had, they brought over here with them from the Caribbean. And it's really important that we mark all the contributions that they have made to our society today. So we're going to watch, actually, before I do that slide, a little video to teach us some more about the Windrush.
In 1948, Britain was just starting to recover from the Second World War. Towns and cities had been bombed. Thousands of homes and buildings were destroyed, and they all needed to be rebuilt. In the Caribbean, thousands of men and women had served in the British Armed Forces. After the war, some of them answered an advert to come to Britain, where there were lots of different jobs available. Other people just wanted to see England, which they'd heard so much about. They all got on a ship, the Empire Windrush, which left the Caribbean to travel thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean. This was the first time so many Caribbean people had come to live in Britain. Many more arrived in the following years. It was on the 22nd of June 1948 that the Empire Windrush arrived at Tilbury Docks in Essex. But when its passengers got off, they found that Britain was not as friendly to them as they had hoped. It was cold and grey. And the Caribbean people soon experienced racism and discrimination. They found it hard to get proper homes to live in and to make friends with British people. Later, many of their children were bullied at school because of the colour of their skin. There were racial attacks, and years later, race riots broke out in cities across Britain. Settling into a new country was difficult, and black people had to stick together and support one another.
So like you heard in that video, life was not always easy for the black communities that had migrated over to England. But actually there was so much value and skill in everything they have brought, and their contribution to our society today is something that we really have to focus on, and that is what Windrush Day is about. So back in 2018, Communities Minister Lord Bourne had said about Windrush Day, a Windrush Day will allow communities up and down the country to recognise and honour the enormous contribution of those who stepped ashore at Tilbury Docks 70 years ago. It will keep their legacy alive for future generations, ensuring that we all celebrate the diversity of Britain's history. And here is a picture here of Prince Charles and the Duchess Camilla meeting some actual Windrush generation. These men were actually on the HMS Windrush. They came on that first boat all those years ago. And the Prince Charles had this to say. He said, as we honour the legacy of the Windrush generation and the invaluable contribution of black people in Britain, I dearly hope that we can continue to listen to each other's stories and to learn from one another. The diversity of our society is its greatest strength and gives us so much to celebrate. So we're going to have a chance in a moment to do a bit of singing, thinking about all this. But actually before that, I've got some pictures of some books here that again will help you to learn more about the Windrush. So as I said the first time, let's learn from other stories to help us to gain more insight into the understanding of what lives are like for other people. So Coming to England is a story that I think year 4s and 5s have in their classroom. Some of you in year 6 would have read it, Reading Gladiators, possibly a few years ago. But it's all about the story of a family coming from Trinidad over to England and what they experienced when they were here. There's also a sort of younger children's picture book version, which is brilliant. There is Windrush Child, absolutely fantastic book by Benjamin Zephaniah. And there is this one, which is called The Place for Me, which is stories all about and from the Windrush generation. So with some of these, you can read them and really learn some more. So we're going to have our time now to have our song. I'm going to put the song into this point of the assembly today, because I feel like it is time for us to really think about the value of all of God's people that we have. And so we're going to sing, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. So thinking about our hymn this morning, He's got the whole world in His hands, and that includes all different types of people, includes all of our communities, that includes our migrant community and our refugee community. Now, the two things are separate, but there are many similarities. As migrants, you're moving from one place, one culture, one country to another. As refugees, you're doing the same thing, but you're coming because you have to, not because you're making the choice to. But today we need to think about all of those communities and how actually the experiences they receive when they enter a new place is not always positive. So what can we do to change that experience for them? Good and gracious God, we pray for all people who are migrating, particularly those who are forced from their homes or separated from their families because of threats of violence and persecution. We ask that you protect and keep them safe. Although we come from different countries and have our origins in different cultures, we were created by you and are made in your image, and therefore we all share a dignity that is deserving of respect. Lord, we ask that you give us strength to defend those who are marginalised, to give aid to those in need, and to come to the defence of those who are vulnerable, and to welcome those who are on the move into our homes and into our hearts. Amen. So you might now want to spend some time talking as a class about what you have learnt this morning about refugees, about migrants, and actually about how their stories can actually often have similarities and what we can do within our homes and our families and our communities to actually make the experiences of others who are coming to our country a better place for them to be. I wish you all a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay well, and work hard. And I will see you next week. Bye.